Just a little... hello, human beings. PowerGamer here. Sorry, just doing some tinkering. And... Okay. And... Okay. Whew. Finally got that thing fixed. A new year is upon us after all, so it's good to get a head start on upcoming projects. I mean, normally I just put them off so long that I end up completely forgetting about it. Hell, I got the PS5 in 2021, and since then it's basically been acting as a dust shield. So it's about time I finally use this thing, and what better game to play than the one that came pre-installed on it?
Astro's Playroom. You gotta start somewhere, I guess. A game that was basically designed as a tech demo for the PlayStation 5, and while some people might think it's not worth giving attention to, just because something was meant to be a show-off doesn't mean it can't have value. I mean, Wii Sports was a tech demo, and that thing took the world by storm. Astro didn't, but it still got some solid attention. This is actually the third game to feature this character, the first being the Playroom, a tech demo bundled with the PlayStation VR, which featured a bunch of mini-games, one of which having you interact with a little world to save a stranded group of tiny robots. People really enjoyed this concept, so the developers, Team Asobi, decided to make it into a full-fledged game titled Astrobot Rescue Mission. This game was also very popular, so they decided to hang on to this IP for future uses. Astro's Playroom initially began as a concept for the upcoming PlayStation 5 and its unique DualSense controller. While this controller wasn't as unique as something like the Wii Remote, it did have a lot of interesting features, so the team ended up creating at least 80 different concepts to show it off, and eventually they made it into a full-fledged game which would serve as a launch title for the system. Because of this, they decided to make it a celebration of the PlayStation brand by including a bunch of references to not only various PlayStation games, but the consoles themselves as well. The game was first unveiled at the PlayStation 5 reveal event on June 11th, 2020, and released as both a launch title and pack-in game for the system on November 12th of that same year. So we can assume it sold roughly 65 million copies since, well, it came pre-installed on all consoles. It was met with pretty solid reviews since, while it was nothing mind-blowing, it did have some pretty impressive elements for what was essentially a free game. Because of this, Team Asobi would end up creating a full-fledged sequel called Astrobot, which will release in 2024, essentially being the Wii Sports Resort equivalent.
And Astrobot is arguably the most universally acclaimed game of the last year, so I've been itching to try it out. But of course, before I do that, I gotta review its predecessor and see if it's still worth playing. I know I am technically skipping Astrobot Rescue Mission, but that's a VR game and I don't even own a PSVR, so I think I'm good. Either way, it's about time I finally reviewed something on the PS5, so let's give it a go.
The game is basically no story. You're just a little robot named Astrobot who explores these areas filled with other astrobots to collect things for this giant lab called the PlayStation Labo. Good thing this place is made of cardboard, and that's pretty much it. I will easily give credit to the presentation. This game looks great, especially for what was supposed to be just a tech demo. It's so colorful, and the animations are great. The soundtrack is really good too, since it all has this kind of techno beat to it, which is fitting for the whole robot theme. The game is a platformer that has you explore 4 different levels, each one themed around a different PlayStation console. Kind of. I'll explain that more in a bit. Astrobot controls really well, and by default he only has 2 moves. He can punch things with the square button, and if you hold it up, you can charge up a spin punch, and if you hold the X button in the air, you shoot these lasers, which let you hover for a second. Your main objective of each area is to just get to the end. The platforming is pretty basic, and the enemies go down quickly. Most you just need to punch or hit with your lasers, but some have more unique methods like ripping out their wires. Astro dies in only 1 hit, but you have infinite lives, and checkpoints are extremely plentiful, so dying is almost meaningless. This game is a lot like the Lego or Little Big Planet games, where the real meat and challenge comes from finding all of the collectibles. Each level is divided into 4 sections, and each section contains 6 collectibles, 4 puzzle pieces and 2 artifacts that are then used to decorate the Labo, which serves as the hub world. The puzzle pieces are randomized to fill out this mural, while the artifacts are very deliberate. Each one is some sort of PlayStation accessory, and as previously stated, each one is tied to a different console depending on the area. There's the Memory Meadow, a field dedicated to the original PlayStation, the SSD Speedway, a space area dedicated to the PS2, the Cooling Springs, a beach resort dedicated to the PS3, and the GPU Jungle, a jungle dedicated to the PS4. When you reach the end of the level, you're given a bonus artifact, which is just the console that level is based around. I think this is a really cool idea, since it's a fun history lesson, and I've always liked when games are really self-aware about real-life hardware. Kinda like how Pokemon always has a real-life console in your room, and Luigi's Mansion with the communication devices. And what's really cool is that you admire the artifacts not by spinning the joystick, but by rotating the entire controller as if you have the object in your hands. Like I said, the game was designed as a love letter to the PlayStation brand, and that's not just with artifacts. There's a lot of little Easter eggs of bots dressed up as other PlayStation characters. Crash Bandicoot, The Last of Us, Devil May Cry, Metal Gear Solid, Ape Escape, and way more.
But didn't I say this game was designed to show off what the DualSense can do? Well, that's more where the vehicle sections come into play.
Every other section requires some sort of vehicle that you zip Astro into by flicking up on the touchpad, and all of these require a very different control scheme based around the DualSense. There's a very pricey amount of features crammed into this thing, and this game is going to make sure you use every single one of them. The most prominent features are the triggers and how they give varying feedback depending on what you're doing in the game, and of course the built-in gyroscope. The Cooling Springs has the spring thing that you charge up with the triggers and then tilt the controller left and right. The GPU Jungle has you in a monkey robot where you climb by holding the triggers and shifting the controller, which honestly feels really cool. The SSD Speedway has you in a rocket ship where you use the triggers and and tilt to steer, and the memory meadow is the most unique one because you're placed in a ball and have you move by swiping on the touchpad. All this stuff may seem weird and gimmicky, but they are actually pretty fun to control. It really feels like these things were designed with these special features in mind, and they genuinely do help the experience. Swiping to roll the ball is a pretty interesting gameplay element. Clicking down the triggers while climbing really does feel like you're grabbing these things. Hell, there's even a couple spots where you have to press lightly or else it breaks off. That's really cool. I'd say the spring is probably the weakest of the four, but it's not bad. It's just kind of average, and the rocket can be tricky, but still pretty fun. These aren't things that were thrown in there for the sake of variety. They were a deliberate choice to show what this controller can do and how it can vastly enhance otherwise simple gameplay. But if that's too much for you, you can always just go for the weapons. Yeah, there's a couple levels where you can bring out firearms. There's a rapid-fire machine gun and a bow you have to charge up, and these things are fine, but they don't really add much. Levels also have coins you can collect, but instead of giving you extra lives, they can be used in this gacha machine in the labo. It costs 100 coins an item, and it gives you extra puzzle pieces, artifacts, these little statues that populate the labo, and soda cans, which just waste your time and money. But thankfully you can't get duplicates, so it's only a matter of time before you empty this thing. Some of the levels even have mini-bosses in them. There's this robot head that shoots cannonballs and you have to hit the bombs with the arrow, and this electric ball you have to ignite bombs with using the rocket jets. Once you beat the level, you can also unlock a speedrun thing, but that's just for online leaderboards.
I'd say this game is a pretty fun time, just not much of a pretty fun time. Yeah, if there's any problems this game has, it's that there's barely any content here.
I mean, it's not the end of the world since, again, this game came bundled in with the console, but there isn't a huge amount of stuff to do in here. You can complete the game 100% in only 3 hours. You might have to replay the levels once or twice to get any collectibles you missed or extra coins for the gacha machine, but even that shouldn't take very long. It's kind of a shame because this game has some really cool ideas and level designs. You'll be flinging yourself out of a giant slingshot to hang glide, using a giant fan to make longer jumps, blowing into the microphone to activate fans, jumping on giant CRT TVs. You can even mess around with other bots around the level for no reason other than it's funny. But since this is only a tech demo, there isn't a huge reason to keep coming back to it. It's no wonder they were able to make a full-fledged game with this concept because there's a lot of potential here. It just took a little time to reach it. But once you beat all 4 main areas, you unlock another beneath your entry point in the CPU plaza. This transports you to the 1994 throwback where after a small platforming sequence on PS1 discs and memory cards, that's really cool, you face the final boss, the T-Rex, which is based on a PS1 tech demo. Okay, that is awesome. He roars out enemies, bites, and slams down his tail, and you wait for the shockwave, which then lets you punch his eyes. Then he turns into a robot and you have to run from his fire breath. Then it's more of the same, plus he shoots lasers, missiles, and discs at you. After punching both eyes again, you grab his tongue and fling it back into him. We get a fun credits minigame where you pinch the yellow spots to get coins, I only missed one, and then we get one last little trek where you collect artifacts for the PS5. That's the end of the main game, but collecting everything gives you everything. Yeah, there's no full reward, but it was still fun, so who cares?
Game conquered. Astro's Playroom is a cute little time. For what's essentially a test game, there's some really cool ideas and fun gameplay mechanics, so it's easy to see why they were able to take the foundation and build upon it to make something much bigger. I mean, sure, there's not really much here content-wise, but since it's basically a free game that comes with the console, there's no harm in trying it out. I guess you could also argue it's a $500 game that comes with a free PS5 as a bonus instead. Honestly, that might be a better investment.